Okay.
I mean, the fact that it already looks quite cool with just being a red outline, that is a very, very good sign. Because if you imagine this with like full block palettes and just cool looking towers and industrialness, oh, it's going to be so cool. It's going to be so cool. I cannot wait to start working on this thing.
Hi, I'm ThaMango, and today I'm going to be transforming MumboJumbo's Season 9 HermitCraft base into an absolutely huge mega base. Before we begin, I just want to say thank you so much for the support on the Grian base transformation. Reading all of your comments and support has been amazing. Thank you all so much. A lot of people have been asking for a world download. I'll be posting a world download which contains both the Grian and Mumbo base downloads if this video somehow reaches 5,000 likes. Also, if you're new around here, I post giant mega projects every single week, so please consider subscribing so you don't miss the next video. Anyway, let's begin with the building. To start off, I decided to plan out the build's footprint using red wool, adding back in the bridges that Mumbo originally planned out. His original plan was to create 3 storage rooms all connected to the main structure using bridges. I assume he removed these to try and downscale the build to make it more feasible to build, which is completely understandable considering he had to build this in survival, which I luckily don't have to do. I then worked on creating some pretty basic terrain for the front part of the building to sit on. This would help it blend in more nicely with the surrounding area. To try and keep it in theme with the landscape, I added some rocks in the same sort of style that Grian used in his base, so the builds would look very good next to each other. Moving on, I worked on transforming what is probably the most iconic part of the entire base, the vault. This is where Mumbo essentially lived, with a large building behind just being where his farms would be located. I wanted to really lean into the sci-fi fantasy vibes of the building, and so I raised up the vault into the sky to make it more of a spectacle and to make it easier to see from far away. This would also make it harder to break into. I then extended the top and the bottom of the vault to make it into a cube to make it more satisfying to look at. In these extended areas, I added in loads of neon lights, so at night time it really lights up and looks amazing. I then updated the walls which go around the vault a bit more, as they looked pretty thin for what are meant to be very high security walls. I tried to use the same blocks that the wall originally used, with lots of darker stones and cyan coloured blocks. I also mixed in some basalt as I really liked the look of it with all of the deep slate and black stone. I decided that the updated wall would be 2 walls thick to add extra security to the vault. On the inside of the walls would be a huge quarry, which goes all the way down to the rift. I thought it would be good to make use of this area, considering since the Grian base update, Grumbot no longer lives down there. At the bottom of the hole would be a huge lake filled with cyan glass to imitate some kind of magical liquid, which helps the vault levitate above. I then cleaned up the area a bit, seeing as I left a bit of a mess when I moved Grumbot. Back above ground, I began building up some towers on either side of the vault. This is the only structure I plan to add which Mumbo didn't originally plan, as it's an extension of the vault, so I feel like I can get away with it. These towers would hold up triangular magnets on top, which help to steady the floating vault in place. I then moved on to update the entranceway with a new staircase up. As well as this, I added some supports around the path that surrounds the big hole to make sure people don't fall in. Moving on to the interior of the vault, I tried to keep it relatively similar to the original bases. I kept the design very simplistic and very symmetrical. There would be a few chests located in the vault, however the majority would be in the other storage rooms, which we'll build later. Seeing as Mumbo is the richest hermit to ever live, I then added in just 1% of his wealth in diamond blocks. I also added in some extra diamonds scattered around, using invisible item frames, which is a cool trick I saw in a HermitCraft video. If you're wondering how you get into the vault, the plan is that you're meant to elytra up and enter through the bottom. There would ideally be some kind of tripwire hook to open up the vault as you enter the base, but I suck at redstone. The time had come to work on the tall tower located at the back of Mumbo's base. For anyone unaware, this is what all of Mumbo's farms would be located inside of, kind of like a small industrial district. This is essentially the centerpiece of the base where all of the items Mumbo needs would be made, before they're shipped off to the different storage areas through different transportation streams. I kept the shape of the tower and just worked on adding extra detailing to the walls, using the same block palette that had already been set. I also decided to turn the warped plank strips going up the base into solid strips of neon cyan lights, as I felt it would stand out much better and fit the theme of the build well. For these I used verdant frog lights with cyan glass in front of them. For every layer of the tower I tried to use a unique wall design, so that it wouldn't look too repetitive. I did keep each similar enough though that it wouldn't look too messy with too many different styles. To separate each layer, I added in barriers around them, so each could be used as a balcony if needed. These would offer amazing views, as the tower goes all the way to the maximum build height. It's also worth noting that I constantly tried to use as many light sources as I could along the walls, so the tower would light up really well at night time. I used a mixture of soul torches and end rods, as well as obviously the strips of frog lights. To cap off the build, I wasn't sure what to do, as I wanted to keep the shape Mumbo had made but wasn't sure how. I decided to connect all of the spikes of the building with black stone walls, giving it a sort of scaffolding look. At the top of the base would be a huge neon cube, which would be the power source of the whole base, powering all of the farms. This would be made up of the magical liquid from the underground lake we made earlier. Finally, to make the base visible from anywhere, I added in a huge beacon which would shine through the power orb. I wanted to ensure that the base all felt connected, and so I built some pipes which connect the main tower to the vault area. I used blast furnaces to build these as I think they're extremely underrated as a building block. Next up, I moved on to the storage towers. These would be much smaller than the main tower, and were much quicker to build. I built them the same way though, building them up layer by layer with unique designs per layer. While these wouldn't be as large as the main tower, I still wanted them to look very cool, so they wouldn't be too overshadowed. Once I built one tower, I'd copy it around to all of the sides of the central tower, other than the side with the vault. While the tower doesn't look very tall in comparison to the main structure, it's well over 150 blocks tall, so it could easily be a mega base itself, let alone part of one. Moving on to the top of the tower, I wasn't sure what to do, but I added in a kind of solar power unit, which absorbs power from the main power orb. I then extended out spears of emeralds and gold blocks, which I switched to end rods and glass panes. This made a cool looking particle effect in the sky, like power is being sucked out of the orb. This really helps to bring the entire build to life, and adds a lot of character. Seeing as it wasn't Grian's base, I felt like I had to add a back to it. For the areas around the back where there was no terrain, I just extended the base of the build downwards to fill in any gaps. I then began work on a bridge design, which would be used to connect the main industrial tower to all of the storage buildings. I kept the design relatively simple, with large arches under the pathway to hold it up. I also mixed in some lapis deep slate to add some unique blue colour to the bridge, which isn't seen anywhere else on the build. Once the design was finished, I copied it around to connect all of the storage buildings. I raised the bridge a bit higher on the front ends than it was on the back, to add some unique height variety. To add some vibrancy to the build, I created a small unique tree design, which I could copy along the bridge to make walking along it more appealing. As well as this, I added in some more pipes which run along the side of the bridge, as well as some pipes on the side of the storage building which enter into the ground. I'm not going to make any interior for the central tower, as it would be saved exclusively for automated farms to be built in, and I have no clue how any of those work. I will however be working on the interior for the storage rooms, which will essentially just be large rooms filled with lots of chests. I kept a gap of about 8 blocks open between the interior and the exterior walls, so any storage mechanisms could easily be fitted in. For the design of the room, I kept it very open, with lots of copper plates lining the walls. I wanted the room to look very secure, not as secure as the vault, but still difficult to break into. I then flipped the design around once I was done to make it symmetrical, and joined it back up to the pathway so you can enter it easily. To bring the area to life, I decided to cover it in mushrooms. My friend Bobgeam created these really cool mushroom designs, which fit the colour scheme of the build while looking very fantasy based. I added some hanging end rods from the mushrooms to help them light up at night, and then added in a bunch all around the build. I felt like these would fit the build a lot better than trees. As well as these, I added in a couple of smaller rocks to make the terrain look a bit more rough and natural. These really helped to add a lot of personality to the landscape. One thing I felt was missing from the build was protection. Right now, anyone could just break into the vault, and so I added the only thing reasonable to protect it: a giant robotic spider. My friend Bobgeam once again came up with a design for this, as he's amazing at building organics. The end result looks scary enough to hopefully frighten Grian away from the vault. I think I may have ruined the scariness though, as I decided to add a moustache onto the spider and name him Allan. At least it suits him quite well. And now I'm on to the final touches. I added a few towers or warped vines around the build, similar to what Mumbo had in his original base. They fit the build well and give a good throwback to the original. Finally, I wanted to add some extra height for terrain as it felt a bit flat, even with the cliffs. I ended up creating huge pillars of fancy looking terrain, with pieces jutting out of them. I painted them with some grass areas and then used a gradient to paint the rest with a sharp looking stone palette. After adding some foliage to them, I copied the designs and pasted them around the surrounding area of the build. I then went back and added some mushrooms along them to make them look even more overgrown. And that was the build finished. I'm chuffed to bits with the end result.